It began in the shadows of the 20th century, a time when the world thought the Cold War was over and peace had a chance to breathe. But in the sands of the Middle East, and in the corridors of Washington, London, and beyond, a storm was forming, a storm that would change the world forever. The man behind the letter. Osama Bin Laden, a name that would later become synonymous with one of the darkest days in modern history. Born into one of the wealthiest families in Saudi Arabia, he was not raised in poverty or oppression, but in privilege. Yet, during the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s, Bin Laden transformed from a quiet, educated man into a militant leader. In Afghanistan, he fought alongside the Mujahideen, backed by both local resistance fighters and foreign powers, including covert U.S. support to push back the Soviet Union. This experience shaped him. It taught him dangerous lessons. A small, determined force could bring down a superpower. Religious ideology could unite fighters beyond borders. The seeds of conflict. By the early 1990s, tensions between the United States and certain Middle Eastern groups had begun to harden. The Gulf War of 1992-1991 left a deep scar in Bin Laden's mind. The presence of U.S. troops on Saudi soil, the birthplace of Islam, was, in his eyes, an unforgivable sin. It wasn't only about military presence. In Bin Laden's worldview, the West was guilty of three main offenses: occupying Muslim lands, supporting regimes he considered corrupt or oppressive, spreading cultural and moral values he saw as a threat to Islam. These grievances brewed silently at first, but as the decade went on, Bin Laden's criticism of U.S. foreign policy turned into open hostility. 9/11's the turning point? On September 11, 2001, the world watched in horror as two planes struck the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. Another hit the Pentagon. A fourth crashed in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost in a matter of hours. The attacks shattered the illusion that wars could remain over there. For the first time in decades, the American homeland was under direct assault. In the aftermath, the United States declared a global war on terror. But hidden within this chaos, something else emerged. A manifesto of sorts. A document written before and after the attacks that attempted to justify the unimaginable. The birth of the letter. The letter to America was not just a rant from a fugitive militant leader. It was a calculated piece of propaganda. Written in both Arabic and later translated into English, it was addressed directly to the American people, bypassing governments and targeting the public mind. Its purpose: to explain why Al-Qaeda targeted the United States, to outline Bin Laden's political and religious demands, to rally sympathizers and justify his cause in his own words. But this was no olive branch. This was a warning, wrapped in accusation and ideology. A message for the world. When it first appeared online in late 2002, many dismissed it as extremist noise. But for intelligence agencies, journalists, and historians, it became a critical document. A roadmap into the mind of a man who declared war on the most powerful nation on earth. And now, decades later, the letter has resurfaced in online discussions, sparking debates about free speech, terrorism, and the fine line between understanding history and amplifying hate. 1. The format and tone of the letter to America, wasn't just an emotional outburst. It was carefully structured like a political manifesto, combining religious references, historical grievances, and accusations aimed directly at U.S. foreign policy. It opened with a question: why are we fighting and opposing you? And proceeded to list a series of justifications for violence, framed as defensive actions rather than aggression. Bin Laden's writing style was direct but layered with religious terminology, meant to give his arguments a sense of moral and divine authority. He positioned himself not as a terrorist, but as a defender of the Muslim world, portraying his movement as a response to American policies rather than blind hatred. 2. Main themes of the letter there were several recurring themes woven throughout the document. A U.S. support for Israel. One of Bin Laden's central grievances was America's unwavering support for Israel. particularly in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He accused the United States of enabling what he described as the oppression of Palestinians and the occupation of Muslim lands. In his framing, this wasn't just a political dispute. It was a religious and moral violation, something he portrayed as an attack on the entire Muslim world. Military presence in Muslim lands. Another key point was the U.S. military bases in the Middle East, especially in Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam and home to its two holiest sites, Mecca and Medina. Bin Laden argued that this military presence was an occupation and an insult to the sanctity of the region. See civilian deaths in Muslim countries. The letter repeatedly referred to civilian casualties caused by American military operations and sanctions, particularly in Iraq during the 1990s. Bin Laden claimed that U.S. policies directly led to the suffering of Muslim populations, framing America as a global aggressor. Cultural and moral criticism. Interestingly, the letter also criticized American social and moral values, condemning what bin Laden saw as widespread corruption, sexual immorality, and the erosion of family structures in Western society. He presented these as signs of America's moral decline, contrasting them with what he portrayed as the purity of Islamic governance. 3. Religious framing. One of the most important aspects of the letter was how religion was used as a foundation for political goals. Bin Laden cited Islamic scripture to justify fighting against the United States, arguing that it was a religious duty for Muslims to defend their lands and resist oppression. This is a common tactic in extremist propaganda, blending faith with political grievance to make their cause seem divinely mandated. By positioning the conflict as a holy war, he aimed to inspire followers not only through anger, but through a sense of spiritual obligation. 4. Strategic communication. While most Americans never read the letter in its entirety, bin Laden's intended audience wasn't necessarily the average U.S. citizen. Instead, he targeted Muslims worldwide to rally support for Al-Qaeda's ideology, sympathizers in the West to challenge the official U.S. narrative, opponents of U.S. foreign policy to create a common cause. The letter was also a form of psychological warfare, a way to get inside the minds of his enemies, provoke debate, and undermine trust in American leadership. 5. The danger of the letter's appeal. While much of the letter is rooted in extremist thought, it also touches on real geopolitical issues. U.S. military interventions, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and Western influence on global culture. This combination of legitimate grievances with radical solutions is what makes such propaganda dangerous. It's not simply lies. It's a mix of truth, selective history, and ideological spin. That's why understanding and dissecting it is so important. Decades have passed since that manifesto first appeared on a website and in British newspapers. But in 2023, something shifted. Suddenly, bin Laden's words, once buried in history's shadow, were breathing again. On platforms like TikTok, social media users started quoting lines from his 2002 letter to America, and the reactions were explosive. 1. The resurgence on social media. In 2023, amid a renewed Middle East conflict, bin Laden's letter went viral, amassing over 719 million impressions across social platforms without coordinated influence from media or government actors. ISD videos quoting the letter sparked heated debates. While some users outright condemned it as extremist content, others, especially Gen Z viewers, began to question long-held U.S. narratives on Israel, war, and foreign policy. Time Vox. In the midst of moral outrage, TikTok and The Guardian removed related content, citing flagrant misinformation risks and the letter's incendiary potential. Wikipedia. Time. Digital content analysts framed it as an example of lawful but awful speech, not governed by government censorship laws, yet deeply problematic and dangerous. Northeastern Global News. 2. A mirror for a conflicted generation. Why did bin Laden's letter find resonance in 2025? The answer lies in its mix of truth and posturing. It addresses real grievances: American involvement in Israel, military presence in Muslim lands, civilian casualties, sanctions alongside extremist justifications. This blend created cognitive dissonance. Some viewers found kernel truths relatable while rejecting the ideology. According to scholars, attempts to reclaim the letter as an anti-colonial anthem often reflect miramassing, imposing Western anti-imperialist views onto an extremist worldview that was, at its core, driven by religious ideology. Religious Freedom Institute. That tension between the letter's ideological danger and its partial alignment with realpolitik critiques became a breeding ground for sensational spread. 3. The new information battlefield. In today's world, ideas are as potent as bombs. The revival of this letter underscores a growing reality. Information warfare is key in the last days. Prophecy watchers tie this to Matthew 24. Nation will rise against nation and false prophets will appear. The ideological battlefield is now streaming live on phones beyond institutional control. This isn't just about geopolitics, it's spiritual. As the Bible warns, deception will intensify in the end times. The letter S virus spread is not a random occurrence, it's a reminder that narratives shape hearts before wars break out. 4. What should believers do? The reemergence of Bin Laden's letter challenges us not to amplify it, but to respond with truth. Discernment over outrage. Understanding historical context while rejecting extremist logic. Truth over echo chambers. Replacing sensational views with biblical narratives of justice and peace. Spiritual clarity over ideological confusion. Recognizing that prophetic times demand more prayer and less reaction. Closing scene. Peaceful transition. Pages of a Bible turning. Images of prayer and calm. Voiceover? We are not called to amplify this letter, but to hold it up as a warning. In these days, when words travel faster than armies, we must anchor ourselves not in viral trends, but in the timeless, unshakable truth of God's word. In this final segment, we must confront a sobering reality. Osama Bin Laden's letter to America has returned to the public sphere not because of historical curiosity, but because it is resonating with modern audiences in unexpected ways. The world of 2025 is experiencing its own political, economic, and moral upheavals. And in this climate, controversial documents have a strange way of regaining life. 1. The 2025 digital resurgence. The year 2025 is unlike the immediate post-9/11 years. We live in a hyper-connected world where TikTok video, YouTube explainers, Reddit threads, and encrypted Telegram groups are all part of the same swirling information ocean. When young people today encounter the letter to America, they don't see it through the same lens as their parents or grandparents. They see it through disillusionment with political corruption, economic instability, endless wars, the perceived moral decay of global leadership. The rise in online reposts and debates about the letter this year is not about supporting terrorism. It is about questioning the narrative they've been told. This is dangerous territory because it can quickly turn from healthy skepticism to extremist sympathy if context is lost. 2. The U.S. government's position in 2025. The American government in 2025 has been forced to respond, not only to the fact that Bin Laden's writings are circulating again, but that they re-influencing political debates among the youth. Government officials argue the letter to America is terrorist propaganda. It contains manipulations designed to incite hatred and violence. It distorts historical events to justify mass murder. However, government critics point out many points in the letter address real grievances: foreign interventions, military occupation, and political hypocrisy. Simply labeling it propaganda without addressing these grievances fuels mistrust. This creates a dangerous stalemate. People either fully reject the letter as pure evil or embrace parts of it without considering the consequences. 3. The danger of misinterpretation in 2002. When the letter first surfaced, the shock value was enough to shut down deeper discussions. In 2025, the danger is people may quote certain sections about Palestine, U.S. foreign wars, or media manipulation. Share these online without the original context of bin Laden's ideology. Accidentally legitimize a worldview that includes violence against civilians as a political tool. This is the razor's edge, where truth and manipulation intertwine so tightly that it becomes hard to separate one from the other. 4. A global prophecy of conflict. Some analysts believe that the letter to America is resurfacing in 2025 for a prophetic reason. A sign of deepening East-West tensions. Global indicators. Middle East flashpoints are intensifying. Economic instability is eroding Western dominance. Religious rhetoric is fueling polarization. The document is being read by some not just as a historical note, but as a warning. A prophecy that the political and moral cracks in the West will eventually lead to its collapse. 5. How should the world respond? Silencing the letter completely is impossible. The internet ensures that once information is out, it's eternal. Instead, it must be taught with context, showing the truth of historical events without endorsing extremist conclusions. Critical thinking must be prioritized, especially for younger audiences. We must confront the fact that Osama Bin Laden as critiques of Western politics are shared by millions worldwide, and that dismissing them as terrorist lies will only deepen divisions. 6. A final reflection for 2025. The letter to America in 2025 isn't just a dusty relic of the war on terror. It's a mirror, showing us how little some things have changed in 2 decades. We must remember, truth without wisdom can be as dangerous as a lie. Freedom without moral responsibility will always crumble. Power without justice breeds rebellion. As long as injustice exists, someone will always be ready to weaponize it for their own ends. Our duty is to face injustice head-on without giving power to those who seek to destroy rather than heal. Closing message for the video. History is a battlefield of ideas. If we do not learn to fight with truth, justice, and clarity, we will be defeated by lies that sound like truth. The letter to America has returned, but how we respond will define whether we are building a future of peace or preparing for another cycle of endless war.